Pushkin. When the pandemic hit in 2020 and everything shut down, hundreds of thousands of people in the US reacted in a surprising way. They started new businesses. This isn't just some anecdotal thing, right? You can see it in the data. In 2020, the rate of new business formation went through the roof. Now, 2.5 years later, the economy has reopened, things are sort of back to normal, but entrepreneurship hasn't died down that much. The rate of new business formation is still way up from where it was before the pandemic. In a world that feels scarier and riskier than ever, people are more willing than ever to bet on themselves. They're becoming entrepreneurs. I'm Jacob Goldstein, and this is What's Your Problem? The show where entrepreneurs and engineers talk about how they're going to change the world once they solve a few problems. My guest today is Harley Finkelstein, a man who may love entrepreneurship more than anyone I have ever met. And this trait is a good fit for his job. Harley is the president of Shopify. Shopify started out building software that makes it easy for people to start online stores. Today, millions of stores use Shopify, and the company's trying to solve a new problem. How do you aggregate the power of millions of small businesses to help them compete against giants? My conversation with Harley started with the beginnings of his life as an entrepreneur. He was a kid who was so impressed by the DJs he saw playing at his friends' bar mitzvahs that he started his own DJ company.
I started a DJ company because I wanted to be a DJ and nobody would hire me.
And how old were you?
13. And it was my dad that said, why don't you start your own company, hire yourself? And so I did. And actually, when my parents didn't have very much money, but my dad made me a business card. And on the business card, it said Harley Finkelstein DJ. And that was the endorsement or the validation, whatever you want to call it, that I needed to have the chutzpah or audacity to walk next door to my neighbor and say, can I DJ your son's bar mitzvah?
And what'd they say?
They said no.
And so then, were you always starting companies? Was it just, can you draw a line from there to starting a t-shirt company when you're in college?
Yeah, during high school, I wasn't really into sports. I wasn't really into different school clubs. I was an entrepreneur, and so I was always trying to start different companies. I started a bunch of smaller ones that didn't work out. Started a poker chip company, making poker chips. I started a company that had was a slipper company called Wool and Stock. Didn't do very well. I started a bunch of small little side hustles like that. But it was only in college when I went to McGill in 2001 where I needed to actually start something for real because my dad wasn't around anymore. Mom and sisters needed the support financially. And that's when I started making t-shirts for universities. And that was really the first business that made any real money.
Can you give me, I feel like there's this very rom-com meet cute of how you get to Shopify.
There is. I don't know if it's rom-com-esque.
It's a meet cute.
I moved to Ottawa in 2005 to go to law school, not to become a lawyer, but to become a better entrepreneur.
Ottawa, Canada.
Our
American listeners.
That's right, yeah. Mentor of mine told me the t-shirt business was cute, but never really had any real potential of scale. And he was teaching law the next year at the University of Ottawa as a guest lecturer. Convinced me that law school might be like finishing school for entrepreneurship. And it very much was. Moved to Ottawa, Canada in 2005, had no friends, had no family there. Asked where the entrepreneurs hung out and was directed to a coffee shop in a small little area of Ottawa called the Glebe. And I walk in, there were 5 other entrepreneurs. And one of those entrepreneurs was this brilliant programmer named Tobias Lutke. And he had just moved to Canada a year or two earlier because he met a girl in Canada and couldn't work because he didn't have his working papers. So started a business selling snowboards on the internet. And in 2004, there was 2 ways to sell a product on the internet. You either posted your products on a marketplace, or you paid some big enterprise software company millions of dollars to build your
store. A marketplace like eBay, or was Amazon even a marketplace?
Amazon wasn't really a marketplace.
So basically eBay.
eBay, there was a couple others like that, yeah. but eBay, that's exactly right. The alternative was you would go and spend, $1 million with IBM. They had a product called WebSphere or ATG or SAP, these big companies. And he didn't have $1 million. So he wrote a piece of software to sell these snowboards and very quickly realized that other people may also want to use the software to sell their own products. And I was one of those first people. I became one of the first merchants on Shopify. And I moved my t-shirt business to Shopify in 2006 And so in 2009, I called Toby and said, I'd love to join you and a small handful of other people and help you build this company and make it easier for more people to try their hand in entrepreneurship. And that was about 12 or 13 years ago.
Great. And so Shopify now is giant, right? And, it's interesting because I feel like for most people, Shopify is invisible. It's maybe like the way, Intel was in 1990 before they started putting their name on every computer or something. Shopify is the thing behind the thing. So it seems like pretty close to if you've bought something online and it wasn't Amazon and it wasn't Walmart, it was probably a Shopify store, right? There's a good chance it's a store that's running Shopify. But just so briefly, what's the briefest version of what is Shopify?
Shopify is the easiest way to sell a product to a consumer. And the vast majority of our merchants use us to sell online. And as we've grown, we're now 10% of all e-commerce in the US. As we've grown, one of the things we've also done is try to figure out what are the other elements of starting and running and scaling a business that is difficult. So whether it's accepting payments, or it's shipping, or it's raising money, having capital. We've gone ahead and gone to these other, what we call merchant solutions. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to use our size, our economy of scale being this, 10% of all e-commerce, which technically, if we were a retailer, we would be the second largest online retailer in America, just given our sales volume.
So companies using Shopify sell more stuff than anybody else online except Amazon.
That's right.
That
That that's exactly right. So if you compare to Target, for example, or compare to Best Buy, Shopify in aggregate stores sells more than those places. So when we go to negotiate rates on payments or on shipping or on capital, we're doing so as effectively the second largest online retailer in America. And then we give those economies of scale directly to the entrepreneurs. And we think that's what really helps them level the playing field.
So to get a sense of the scope of what you do, I thought it would be useful to just talk through an example,
Sure.
Right? So I have this podcast. It's called What's Your Problem? And we don't have any merch.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? Indeed.
Yeah.
So let's...
White T-shirts or black T-shirts.
Sure. Or we could have fun with it, right? We could have a magic 8-ball that says, what's your problem? And it has, answers. You're not grinding hard enough, or you haven't found product market fit, or whatever. So say I come to Shopify, sign up for Shopify. What is the set of things you can do for me?
Yeah. So you come to Shopify.com and for $29, you can set up a beautiful online store. You can pick a theme, or you can design your own theme, and you can start adding products. You can say, I'm going to add this hat or this T-shirt, this water bottle, or you can, in fact, if you're not sure exactly what's going to resonate, ironically, around the product market fit example you gave, you can actually do something called print on demand, where you actually put up a bunch of shirts without even making those shirts yet, and the ones that sell will get printed automatically and then drop shipped to the consumer. But you come on, you build this beautiful store. In a matter of an hour, you have jacobsmerch.com all set up.
What's your problem?
And
.com.
Okay, what's your problem? Sure. What's your problem.com? Although, is that taken?
I'm sure it is.
Okay.
What's your problem.fm?
Or
that's
our
cheesy
podcast.
Okay,
that's good. Or .co or something like that. And so you set up your online store, you add inventory, you set up your payment gateway, and now you're ready to sell. Now you can launch a marketing campaign. You can post ads on Facebook or Instagram or Google from there, or TikTok or Snapchat or anywhere for that matter. When orders come in, you go to your Shopify admin, and that really is your central retail operating system. That's sort of the central nervous system of your business. And orders come in, you can fulfill them. You can use Shopify to do fulfillment. You can use us to buy shipping labels. If you want to see where your traffic is coming from and you want to understand.
So I just want to slow down a little bit there. So when you say I can use Shopify to do fulfillment, this is newish for you, right?
Fairly new,
the stuff you described up until then feels like sort of Shopify classic, right? It's like all the online stuff. It's all the just software stuff. And I feel like there is this shift you're making now into the physical world in a number of dimensions, right? And fulfillment is a piece of that. You had an acquisition last year, right?
That's right.
So fulfillment seems... obviously, it's hard to write software, but software is famously a good business, right? You write the software once and then you can sell it as many times as you want. There's no marginal cost. Fulfillment seems harder, if I dare say so. I mean, tell me about getting into that side of the business.
Yes.
So what does it mean that you can do my fulfillment?
Yeah, sure. So just take a step back for a second. While the internet sort of democratized a lot of things, the one thing it didn't really do very well was help with sort of, atoms. Where software is bits and bytes, atoms and moving product, that didn't actually get better through the advent of the internet. But going back to that conversation we were having a few minutes ago, because we now have such scale, because we are 10% of all e-commerce in the US, we thought about this. We're like, well, what if we can actually help small businesses and larger businesses with fulfillment? And so we began to create this network of third-party warehouses where we tie them together using our software. It's called FMS, Fulfillment Management Software. And any third-party logistics company can apply to be part of this logistics network.
And third-party logistics is another giant kind of behind-the-curtain industry.
Exactly.
Right?
It's who ships you everything.
Yeah.
But the idea is not necessarily that we wanted to get into logistics. It's that it's one of those barriers to success that we thought we can play a role in.
So I'm curious, as you're expanding into these different parts of business, basically, what's been particularly hard? What are you still trying to figure out how to do? What went wrong? What was harder than you expected?
Initially, we decided we don't want to build our own warehouses. It's just the business model that we are using is different than Amazon. We are not doing one-day delivery. We don't think we need to own everything ourselves. And so fundamentally, we thought, hey, there are all these warehouses all over the place that are empty. What if we made them part of the network and effectively configured them using our software? Not every partner warehouse was very good. Some of them actually were really bad. But because we were using a network of warehouses and because Shopify's brand was the thing connecting all these things, even if it was a third-party warehouse, we were responsible. And in the first in the first year or so of fulfillment and shipping at Shopify, we really noticed that some of the warehouses were just not hitting a quality control standard. And so we had to take some of them offline. And does that mean basically customers don't get stuff when they're told they'll get stuff, or it's broken? It could be a combination of things. So if they're doing some sort of like what's called custom kitting, where they need to sort of, the product has to look, let's say you want to, for your merch company, you want to send out your box with stickers on it. Uh-huh. Maybe the stickers are misplaced. Maybe it doesn't get there on time. Maybe it's the wrong product. Maybe it's broken. It could be a combination of all those things. But we actually had to pull some partners out of the network because they weren't hitting a certain quality control thing, which again, even though we're leveraging third parties, from the merchant perspective, the millions of merchants that use Shopify, they don't really care whose fault it is.
Because their customers don't care,
It's always Shopify's fault.
Yeah.
And that was really, really challenging for us.
I mean, it is extraordinary. Like, fundamentally there you're competing against Amazon, right? And like, Amazon is so good at that. It's unbelievable. Like, I'm old enough to remember ordering things before Amazon existed, right? And they're so much better than anything that came before. And you have to be at least that good.
Yeah, I respectfully disagree. I don't think we actually have to be. We have to be as good at the thing we do. But what we don't have to do is we don't have to focus on like this one-day delivery thing is just not that important for most merchants and most consumers.
You have to be that reliable and that good at doing what you say you'll do. Amazon is extraordinary at that.
For Shopify, people's livelihoods are at stake. And because people's livelihoods are at stake, Shopify, for most of the merchants on Shop, for the millions of merchants, we are the most important piece of software they use. And so the term we use is exactly the right one. We have to be reliable. And I think we've done that really, really well, but that is a constant challenge.
After the break, Harley talks about the challenges of growth and of layoffs.
Now, back to the show. So what's like the next thing you're trying to do? Like what? So do you have the warehouse situation is under control now?
That's in a really good place.
What's the next one? What's the new warehouse problem for you?
Yeah, there's always new sort of merchant challenges to solve. I mean, anyone who's been following the news knows that Apple has made advertising and particularly privacy changes that make it more difficult to target a particular consumer. So, for example, I love riding motorized skateboards. I've been a motorized skateboard guy for a very, very long time. My interests are technology, because I lead a technology company, and skateboarding. And so if you are Boosted Board or you're One Wheel, do you know those companies? Have you heard of those?
Yeah, the One Wheel is like the guy on one wheel.
Yeah, on one wheel, yeah, you see them around.
It looks like they're like, it's the thing of the future,
down.
right?
It looks really cool. Yeah,
and
it's like a cool segue.
The Boosted Board, it's just like a skateboard, but the dude's not pushing.
Exactly,
right?
It has motorized, right? Yeah. So if you're Boosted Board or you're One Wheel, the Venn diagram overlap of Harley's interests, which is technology and skateboard, I am the perfect, ideal customer for it. So they can target me really, really well. Well, that has become a lot more difficult now because of some of the change that Apple has made. So what ROAS...
Basically, it's harder for them to target you on like Facebook and Instagram.
They can target me because like maybe I
what
shared.
It means, right?
Exactly.
It's much harder to buy targeted Facebook and Instagram ads.
That's exactly right. So that has made it more difficult, more challenging for small business to find their target customers. What we figured out was, well, if we look at Shopify Shopify as a whole, we actually have a lot of good indication, a lot of good insight on the type of customers that might be right for your particular product. So if you're on Shopify, and Shopify Plus in particular, where this feature sits, you can say, I want to sell more of these 3 products here. I have 10 SKUs, but I want to sell more of these 3 SKUs. You feed it into the audience's algorithm. We feed you back with a sample audience or a lookalike audience. And now when you're buying ads on some of these ad platforms, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or any of the others, Google, for example, you don't just upload your product description and your product photography and your meta information. You also upload this lookalike audience. And we know by doing so, you will get a higher return ad spend.
And that's sort of the kind of ad targeting version of your big idea, which is aggregating, which is scale, basically, right? It's bringing the power of scale to small businesses, right? That's the big idea.
Yeah, when you combine a lot of tiny little lights, you end up with the sun, is an expression I've heard.
Yeah, it's a bit much, but
a lot of tiny little lights. Yeah. But more importantly, think about it this way. When you sell in a marketplace, if you're a brand, you are able to leverage the economy of scale of that marketplace.
When you sell in a marketplace like Amazon.
Like any
or
marketplace.
eBay or something
or
that.
Etsy or any of those. Yeah. You get to leverage the economies of scale of those marketplaces. When you build a custom online store on your own, you get independence.
Right. You own your customers.
You own everything. On Shopify, you get both. You get independence and you get this massive economies of scale. And we think that makes us a really unique company.
You seem very confident, whether you actually are or not. You have a very confident vibe.
Oh, thank you.
But I'm curious, like, what are you worried about, right? You're running this big company. It's been tough times in various ways. When you think about the company, what worries you?
A bunch of things. We're now, we've about 10,000 people that work at the company today. That's a lot of people, making sure everyone's working at the right thing at the right time. That is obviously, how do you scale culture? That's one thing. The second thing that I worry about is I think that it is getting harder in some cases for small businesses to grow and to succeed. I think there's a lot of aggregation happening, and I think that it's as a consumer, I'll say this, not even as the president of Shopify, I think for retail to be interesting and exciting, it needs to have more voices, not less. And I think there are some times where I worry about that, whether or not we're all just going to end up wearing the exact same basic thing.
The other one is, it's more about the macro environment, right? I mean, your stock is down a lot, like a lot of other growth companies. And maybe more importantly, like a lot of other growth companies, you had to lay off a lot of people recently after sort of making a big bet on growth. Tell me about that. I mean, tell me about sort of the bet you made and what worked out and what didn't work out.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the most challenging days of any leader's life is to do layoffs. And we laid off about 10% of our team a couple months ago. When the pandemic started, let's call it March 2020, pandemic starts, all these physical retailers have to shut down their stores. And most of them did not have another channel to sell by. And so their business went from whatever it was doing to zero. And we were really fortunate to be the recipients of most of that business. Most of those retailers that shut down their physical stores to move online came to Shopify. And very quickly, they opened up these beautiful online stores and started selling. And in some cases, and we don't take any credit for it, but we certainly, we helped ensure the business continued. When, as things continued through the pandemic, it was clear that e-commerce was playing a much larger role, both in the lives of consumers and also in the lives of retailers. There's an equation that a lot of people monitor, which is e-commerce as a percentage of total retail. So the numerator in that equation is e-commerce, and the denominator is all of retail. When the pandemic hit, two things happened. E-commerce went up, and the denominator went down because you pulled out all physical retail. So it looked for some time that like e-commerce was everything, and it was. We knew that was not going to stay, but we did think that the growth rate that we saw in 2020, 2021 was more reflective of what it would be in the future.
You thought that pandemic era growth would persist, not just that people would stay, but that the growth rate would stay really high.
We knew that the new baseline would stay, but we also thought it would just increase. And so we staffed up accordingly, both support people and sales people, and those are really the two groups we staffed up. And then at the beginning of this year, in 2022, we realized that, okay, it looks like the growth rate of e-commerce is going to return to a more normalized place circa like 2019, like before the pandemic.
So the growth rate's going to slow down.
The growth rate's going to slow, but it's going to slow to what it was pre-pandemic, but on a much larger base because the rest of the e-commerce like adoption is not going to go away. Yeah. And so we had this insight and we said, look, we took a bet that the growth rate was going to increase. It didn't increase as much as we thought, although it's still quite high. And so we had to make those changes. And that was really, really challenging.
In a minute, the lightning round. including praise for micromanagers and the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur. Okay, back to the show. We're going to close with the lightning round.
You were a bar mitzvah DJ, bar and bat mitzvah DJ.
I was.
What's the one song that's best for getting everybody on the dance floor?
September, Earth, Wind, and Fire.
I heard another interview you did where you sort of made the case for micromanaging. And I loved it because it's nice and contrary. It's like the backlash to the backlash. So give it to me. Give me the case in favor of micromanaging.
The best managers I know are able to work sort of at the 40,000-foot view, set strategy, set the direction, make sure that people are going the right.
So that's macro managing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But also sometimes they have to get into the details. And I think the best leaders and managers I've ever worked with, they get into the details when they need to. Some of the worst managers don't get into the details and they only sort of work at the 40,000-foot view. And even Toby, like sometimes he writes code. There are times where I look at a press release or I look at something that's about to go out and I rewrite the sentence word for word, or I wordsmith it myself because I don't think it's good enough. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that there's this hate on micromanagement. And I don't really mean micromanagement like you don't trust the people that work for you. What I mean is it is important for leaders to get into the details when it calls for it.
What's the best thing about running a tech company in Ottawa, Canada?
Less distraction.
What's the worst thing?
Less inspiration.
What's one thing I should do if I'm in Ottawa in, say, January?
Skate on the Rideau Canal, the largest skating rink in the world.
That's a good one.
And come for dinner at my house.
Okay, thank you. What in your experience has been the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur?
Running a company at scale like Shopify forces you to get really, really good at something. It also makes you get really, really good at being self-aware for the things you're not good at, and either hiring people that are better at it than you are, or I don't know, outsourcing it, I guess, to someone else.
What part of your job are you, in fact, really good at? And what part of your job did you realize, I'm actually not good at that, and I should get somebody else to do that part of the job?
Yeah, there was a period of time that I was like chief operating officer at Shopify, and I don't think I was especially good traditional chief operating officer. I don't live in the details all the time. I tend to think about,
Not that into process?
My favorite thing in the world to do is to tell. The reason I'm on this podcast, the reason I love doing this show with you, and I'll stay on for 5 hours if you'll have me, is I love telling the story of Shopify. I think the story of Shopify is fundamentally the story of entrepreneurship. And no matter where you come from, no matter who you are, what your background is, entrepreneurship has touched most of us. My parents are my father's an immigrant. My grandparents are Holocaust survivors. They didn't call it entrepreneurship, but starting a business was their means of survival. And the fact that I get to spend my life now helping other people find their own versions of success and survival is pretty damn incredible.
So is that the part of your job that you like is telling the story?
Yeah, by far.
What's one piece of advice you'd give to somebody trying to solve a hard problem?
I think a lot of people that are trying to solve hard problems, foundationally, because we're human, fear failure. One of the things that I often think about is what is the cost of failing at this particular thing? If the cost of failing at this particular thing is not that bad, you might as well just go for it full steam ahead. If the cost of failure is your family won't eat that night or you can't pay your mortgage, that's something you should consider. But I think that, I'm just to bring it back to entrepreneurship, I think that right now the cost of failure of starting a business is as low as it's ever been in the history of the world. And so if you try a Shopify store or you try starting a business selling lemonade in Manhattan and it doesn't work, maybe try hot dogs and maybe try pretzels after that. That is something that wasn't available to previous generations. There was too much leverage involved.
And just to flesh that out, the idea is you can start a business now with almost no money, right? With almost no capital. You don't have to buy a factory. You don't have to even buy a cart, right? You just need a computer and an internet connection.
You don't have to buy inventory.
I feel like there is some sharp, interesting entrepreneurship question that I could ask you and that I haven't quite nailed. What is it?
Is entrepreneurship easy? Do most entrepreneurs fail? Maybe.
Will you give me a surprising answer? Is entrepreneurship easy?
No.
Well, that's not the surprising answer.
Okay, interesting. Well, I think that most people, there's a glamorizing of entrepreneurship generally. And I think the reason that I thought that was the right question to ask was I think entrepreneurship is still very, very difficult. It's slightly less difficult now than it was. It's slightly less expensive now than it was, but it's still very, very difficult. And so I think all the glamorizing, whether it's through, my friend is Damon John, so I'll be careful here, but I think Shark Tank is an amazing show, but it glamorizes entrepreneurship. It is really difficult.
What's the sort of underappreciated hard thing about being an entrepreneur?
Loneliness. It's a lonely sport. And I don't think that gets talked about at all. I mean, entrepreneurship, you are by yourself for the most part. You may have a co-founder, but most people don't, and at least when they get started. And even if you're co-founder, it's just the two of you. There's a loneliness to it.
Anything else you want to talk about?
I'd like you to start a merch store.
I'm not out on starting a merch store.
Okay.
I'm really not. I mean, advertising is a tough business. It's very cyclical. Maybe in a recession.
You have a built-in advertising, like what they call these viral loops. You kind of have a built-in viral loop here with your own podcast.
I do have a platform.
Right, you have a platform, you have a podcast.
I do think What's Your Problem? I mean, even just a shirt that says What's Your Problem, I don't know if it's too aggressive on a shirt.
Well, it depends how you say it. It's like, What's Your Problem, Winky Face? And then you had another one also, which is, Have You Found Product Market Fit?
Well, that is a possible problem. I mean, there's a list of possible problems. Haven't found product market fit, not grinding hard enough. I don't know. You tell me, what are other classic problems?
I hate that term. I don't know. Not grinding hard enough.
Okay, you give me a good one. What are possible answers for the entrepreneur to the question, what's your problem?
What's your problem?
If we make a magic 8-ball, has different answers come up?
I can't get my shipping done on time. I don't know. I'm trying. It's a very fascinating issue. You can almost sort of do like there's a whole other game version of your merch store, which is like what is your problem for business? Like you have a problem with capital. You have a problem with I can't accept payments, or I'm selling CBD and no payment gateway will transact my product, or I'm getting a bunch of returns, or I have a coupon code and it got leaked on the internet on Reddit and now everyone's getting 40% discounts.
I feel like we're designing a monopoly for the 21st century.
Kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm not out.
I really quite like it. It is interesting, though. I mean, this is total aside, but maybe interesting. The merch store thing is fascinating because if you go back and you think about merch 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there really was a sense merch was promotional product.
Uh-huh.
And I think something is deeply changed around merch. It's no longer promotional product. And the best example I can give you is we have about 12 stores from the Kardashian-Jenner group, right?
Those are good stores to have.
I mean, these are amazing businesses from, Kylie Cosmetics to Skins to Skims to Good American, across the board. And I remember when they were first announcing that they were going to launch these stores, and the initial reaction by the market, by the public was, yeah, these are just going to be gimmicky kind of promotional things. But actually, in some cases, Kylie Cosmetics is now one of the largest cosmetics companies on the planet.
You're telling me I'm not thinking big enough.
Well,
I'm going to have to figure out a thing I really believe in.
Interesting. Maybe a Magic 8-ball.
It's a fun one. The Magic 8-ball is a fun one.
Harley Finkelstein is the president of Shopify. I do want to sell some merch. So if you want to buy some, if you want a Magic 8-ball or something else, let us know. Email us at problem@pushkin.fm, or you can find me on Twitter @Jacob Goldstein. Today's show was produced by Edith Rusolo, edited by Robert Smith, and engineered by Amanda K. Wong. I'm Jacob Goldstein, and we'll be back next week with another episode of What's Your Problem?